They say the dead don't blink. But the man lying on the parlor floor that April afternoon, he did. Or maybe it was just the wind tugging at the curtain, brushing over the barrel still warm with betrayal. Jesse James wasn't just shot. He was silenced. History may remember outlaws as cold-blooded. But legends? Legends are always personal, and the world never looked at outlaws the same again. What if the world could turn a good man into a legend of blood and bullets? Jesse Woodson James. The name alone conjures images of pistols flashing in the sun, a black hat shading cold, calculating eyes, and the wild clatter of hooves across an endless prairie. We think we know him, the bank robber, the gunslinger, the rebel draped in Confederate gray. But behind the legend lies a far stranger truth. A Jesse James few have heard of, a man whose real story blurs the line between hero and villain, myth and man. This is the story you weren't told about Jesse James. And it begins not with a robbery, but with a broken promise. In 1865, fresh from the wreckage of the Civil War, Jesse wasn't yet a criminal. He was a teenage farm boy, shy around girls, devoutly religious, and obsessed with honor. He sang in his church choir. He quoted the Bible with earnest conviction. Neighbors said he dreamed of becoming a preacher. Yes, Jesse James once wanted to save souls, not steal from them. But when Union soldiers, known as Redlegs, raided his family farm, they burned his stepfather, tortured his mother, and hanged men he called kin. They whipped him bloody, and nearly hanged his stepfather for suspected Confederate ties. Jesse's dreams crumbled under the weight of betrayal. War didn't forge Jesse. It broke and remade him, fusing boyhood with brutality. Frank James, Jesse's older brother, rode with Confederate partisans, but Jesse learned to kill with purpose and charm with poison. When the war ended, the war inside him didn't. The boy who wanted to build churches instead learned how to burn them down. The transformation was terrifying. Jesse joined Frank and a ruthless guerrilla band led by Bloody Bill Anderson. They rode with black flags flying, a symbol that they would give no quarter, no prisoners, and no mercy. At just 16, Jesse rode into battle, gun in hand, chanting Bible verses as he pulled the trigger. "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord," he muttered before executing Union sympathizers. By 1866, the war was over, but Jesse wasn't done fighting. America was rebuilding, but Jesse saw nothing to rebuild, only enemies to punish. And so, he found a new war, against banks, railroads, and the federal government he believed had betrayed his people. But here's the part history often leaves out. Jesse James was not just robbing banks out of greed. He was waging a political war. You see, many of the banks Jesse targeted were owned by Northern interests. After the war, Union investors flooded Missouri, buying up land from desperate farmers at rock-bottom prices. Whole towns were foreclosed into oblivion. Banks became symbols of Northern oppression. In Liberty, Missouri, the teller swore Jesse smiled as he fired the warning shot. Not rage, not desperation, control. It wasn't the money. It was the performance. The people cheered when the smoke cleared. Not for the victims. For the outlaw who robbed Yankees and rode off like a legend. In Jesse's mind, he wasn't a thief. He was a Confederate avenger, stealing back what was stolen from his people. In fact, Jesse wrote passionate letters to newspapers after his robberies, signing his name proudly. He wasn't hiding. He wanted the world to know. I am the last soldier of the South still fighting. And astonishingly, it worked. Poor Southerners adored him. They named their sons after him. Women mailed him love letters. Politicians whispered their admiration. Jesse James, outlaw, became Jesse James, folk hero. But glory came at a steep cost. Jesse lived like a hunted animal, moving constantly, using aliases, trusting no one. His gang, once filled with loyal friends, grew greedy and reckless. They botched robberies. They killed civilians. Worst of all, Jesse grew paranoid. He started seeing betrayal everywhere, even in his closest allies. After a failed bank robbery in Northfield, Minnesota, where 2 civilians and 2 gang members died, Jesse became convinced God was no longer on his side. He started riding ahead alone. He changed horses more often, checked over his shoulder more. The hero of the people had become a ghost among friends. Or maybe he saw ghosts in them. He was right to worry. The law was catching up. So were the Pinkertons, the most feared detective agency in the world. They launched a private war against Jesse, culminating in a fiery attack on his mother's farm that killed his younger half-brother. Jesse's crusade for justice had turned into an endless spiral of blood. And here's another history they don't teach in school. Jesse James was trying to surrender. In the final months of his life, Jesse made quiet overtures to Missouri's governor, Thomas Crittenden. Through back channels, Jesse offered a deal. A full confession, surrender, and retirement in exchange for a pardon. The governor agreed to his face. But Governor Crittenden had another plan. He secretly authorized a $10,000 bounty, a fortune at the time, for anyone who would kill Jesse James. It was not justice. It was a contract hit. The betrayal came from within. Jesse's own gang members, the Ford brothers, Robert and Charlie, agreed to assassinate him for the reward. On April 3, 1882, Jesse James stood in his parlor, unarmed, adjusting a picture on the wall. Robert Ford drew his gun and shot him in the back of the head. Jesse never saw it coming. The man who survived Civil War, brutal manhunts, and endless betrayals was killed while dusting a picture frame. He was just 34 years old. The Ford brothers expected to be hailed as heroes. Instead, they were condemned as cowards. Robert Ford would spend the rest of his life running from the ghost of Jesse James. He was eventually murdered himself, shot in the back, just like he had done to Jesse. Jesse's death didn't erase his legend. It enshrined it. Overnight, Jesse became bigger than ever. Songs, dime novels, stage plays, and eventually Hollywood films all painted him as a tragic anti-hero. A man forced into crime by a cruel world, a rebel who stayed true to himself until the bitter end. So, what you didn't know about Jesse James is this. He wasn't just a bandit. He wasn't just a killer. He was a boy who loved the Bible. A man who believed he was fighting a holy war. A rebel who tried to make peace, and was betrayed before he could lay down his guns. His life is a mirror, reflecting how broken promises, revenge, and paranoia can twist noble intentions into tragic ends. Jesse James didn't die for gold. He died for an idea that, no matter how flawed, he refused to abandon. Even now, over a century later, Jesse James calls to something deep inside us. The yearning for justice in a world that seems rigged against the little guy. The thirst for freedom even at terrible cost. The hunger for a cause worth living and dying for. Even the good book says in Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 7, "Surely oppression makes a wise man mad." And Jesse James, he was no exception. He wasn't born a killer. He was carved into one, by war, by betrayal, by a world that mistook cruelty for justice. Once, he dreamed of saving souls. In the end, he could barely save his own. Jesse James didn't just steal from banks. He stole a piece of all of us. The part that dares to believe we could survive a world gone mad and still come out clean. Maybe that's why his ghost still lingers. Because deep down we know, There's a Jesse James in every man the world pushed too far. In the end, maybe Jesse James wasn't the last rebel, just the first of many born from a world where justice failed. But what do you think? Was Jesse James a cold-blooded killer, or a soldier who never stopped fighting a war the world forgot? Leave your thoughts in the comment, let's talk about it. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more.